Also want to thank the panelists. It's great that you're sharing your information and knowledge, not just the people here, but the people who are going to listen to the recording. And lastly, thanks to the people showing up and the people listening in the future. This is really for to demystify some of the questions people have and some of the misconceptions. So we'll each talk for 8 to 10 minutes and then open it up to questions, or I'll present some questions. So this is for people. I often hear this, oh, I'm too small to sell. Would anyone be interested in buying me, and why? So I just want to talk a little bit about the why buyers might buy a company, say under 2 million, under 1 million, a company that does 500,000 in annual revenue. Why? Well, there's multiple reasons, 5 or 6. I'd say first is if you are specialized in an area, you do legal translation or you do medical interpreting, something along those lines. If you have a specialization and the company that buys you has that specialization, that's one very clear reason why they would buy you, to expand on their specialization, get more skilled people who are in the field, whether interpreters, translators, etc. Another one is growing geographically. So you have a buyer who's in the West Coast and they want to enter, who knows why, New York, New Jersey region. Mr. Bryant, you enjoy it there, but many people don't. But say, why would you want to? So you're going there, say you have an interpreting business and you're looking for regional presence in say the Southeast or the Northeast, etc. That's another good way to expand within the US, for example. But even more interesting for a buyer, say, who wants to go into Asia. And rather than opening up a business, dealing with paperwork, the challenges politically, the costs, you buy a company that's already in Japan. You buy a company in China. You buy a company in Argentina. Why? Because you don't have the same costs, the salary costs, etc., and you don't have to set this up. You're paying for everything. It's like a ready-made arrival. The other obvious reason people are buying because they're looking for skilled resources. Interpreters are still hard to find good interpreters. Darlene can tell you ASL interpreters are at a premium. You buy a smaller ASL company, and that is great for the company and for you. But bottom line, why would companies buy your smaller business? It's around revenue and profit. It always comes down to dollars. So if you have a $500,000 business and your profit is 100,000, great. That means that maybe within 3 years they recoup their investment, or they might double the investment. So it's a dollars and cents calculation. But let's talk quickly about risks for the buyer. There are multiple risks. This is why a lot of companies don't buy a small company. The biggest risk is very simply a loss of income or value. If you're a $500,000 company and one of your top accounts is 25% of your business, and for some reason they go away, you've just lost half your investment as a buyer. So it's very important as the buyer to know who the clients are, what the relationship is with the CEO or the company, who's the face to these clients. And you want to know that because if the owner leaves and the owner has been doing everything, by the face to the clients, the interpreting or billing, you interfacing with their freelancers, and they go away, can you fill the gap? And if you can't fill the gap, again, you lose income. So owners leaving in a small company, you have to make sure you have that covered. Otherwise, that's a big risk. Another one that people don't talk about enough is every owner, and these panelists can talk about it, they've created their own culture. And it's not over 1 week or 1 year or even 5 years. It's 10, 15, 20 years. The freelancers are used to a certain way of being treated. The clients are being treated this way, and the vendors. And all of a sudden, this new person comes in, changes, lowers the pricing for the freelancers, etc. That's a real problem. So you need to be aware of the culture you are buying. and you can't do the, kind of the macho, we're taking over, we're doing it our way. Small company, you risk again to alienate some of the employees that are staying, the project managers, etc. Let's get to a third important point, and everyone asks, what is the pricing like? So just to be real clear, there's downward pressure on pricing right now for all LSPs, language companies that are selling at this point. Why? AI is still impacting. If you're not using AI, you don't have the technology chops, you're losing a little bit of value. There's an uncertainty in the economy. We have a lunatic in office in the U.S. that's impacting some of the stability of our country. So if your business is under 2 million, you're looking at what's roughly, you'd say, a 2.5 times multiple of your EBITDA, adjusted EBITDA. You can use net profit. EBITDA is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization, but let's just say net profit. So if you're a $500,000 company and your profit is 100,000, you're looking at maybe, what's the math? 2.5 times that. So that's 250,000. So you're looking at maybe a 2.5 times multiple, maybe a 3 times multiple, but probably not because of the issue. So how does a buyer buy? They might put cash up front and then some kind of earnout structure or targets, because they have to mitigate the risk when they're buying. The last piece I'll say, and then I want to introduce you to Jackie, is you the seller and the buyer, you have these conversations, use a legal document, purchase and sale agreement. I suggest all of you write out a 6-month plan. Put it out there. Hey, I'm gonna work for no cost the first 3 months. Then I'm gonna stay on for the next 3 months, helping with this, this, and this. My role is 15 hours a week. You're gonna keep these people on. You're gonna let go of my HR. Everything you want to spell out and put in a document that you both agree upon. Because post-acquisition, sometimes things don't happen so much. It's like an arranged marriage. The guy's very nice, and all of a sudden he comes in and you're in the kitchen all the time. That's not fair. You didn't agree to that. So you want to have some plan written out that you both agree upon. Because if you veer from that plan, that's not a good sign. And so my role in the role of language transactions is to facilitate these deals, make sure there's no surprises up front, talk about pricing up front, and before it gets to the final thing, say, what is your plan? How long is the owner staying on? How are you going to handle their employees? What's going to do with is that earnout realistic? Maybe it's a seller's note. So all these questions, that's what we do, because we try to make this easier for the transition so there's less surprises. Yeah. All right. That's enough talking from me. I want to introduce you to Jackie. She's I'll let you, a bilingual communication. She's got a great company, a great history, and very skilled interpreter as well as an owner. So Jackie, you got the floor.
Thank you, Mike. Hello, everyone. My name's Jackie Mativier. I'm founder and sole owner of Bilingual Communications in Cary, North Carolina. I'm originally from Puebla, Mexico, but I've called North Carolina home for over 30 years. I started the company in 1991 and became incorporated in 1995. We provide only English and Spanish translation, interpreting both remote and in person, and transcription and voiceover services. We offer these services to different industries like healthcare, education, legal, government, hospitality, and technology. And I'm pleased to say that several of our clients have been with us for a couple decades. Now, for many years, the split between translation and interpreting was about 50-50. But in the last few years, it has shifted to about 40% translation and 60% interpreting. The translation downturn was because several of our clients, particularly those in healthcare, hired in-house translators and or bilingual employees. And then the rise of interpretation came in 2021, after the COVID pandemic. And it was during COVID that I realized that Spanish interpreters are essential workers. I remember driving through I-64, not seeing a single car. It was so eerie. And that's when it hit me. Oh my gosh, I'm an essential worker. Um, so while most people stayed home, we provided simultaneous interpretation for 180 plus press conferences for Governor Cooper. And of course, that gave us a lot of exposure and increased our reputation. Now, the idea of retiring first came up last year when my husband, who has been working with Cisco systems for over 20 years, he started talking about moving to the beach, buying a sailboat, etc. So that got me thinking. We're both 62 years old, and I've always been the one saying, I'll never retire. One, I love what I do, and people pay me for it. But I've been on the path of selling this business for about 10 months now. In March of last year, I attended a conference at NC State University, and that brought so many questions that I hadn't thought about, like how to prepare for the sale, what type of financial statements I would need to get together, and whether the conditions were favorable or not. I also remember they advised me to increase the value of the business so that I would sell it at a higher price. And they were suggesting that I offer more languages. But they gave me pause because that's something I've never been interested in doing. Um, and going through this process has made me realize how important it is to be clear about the reasons for selling the business and to think about what comes next. Now, personally, I have two daughters and now three granddaughters. So, of course, my priorities have changed. And I would also like to start traveling more with my husband and visit my mother, who still lives in Mexico, while I have her. A friend of mine referred me to language transactions. And from my very first conversation with Mike, I knew that he was the right person to represent me in a sale. He knows the language industry inside and out, and he has guided me through the entire process. In fact, within 2 weeks of first talking to him, he brought two potential buyers, excellent companies, one here in North Carolina and one abroad. After a long time of thinking about it, I chose the company that I felt most aligned with my commitment to quality and high standards, and to make sure that they hire the professional interpreters that I have relied upon for years. At the moment, we're in the due diligence, about to get a final contract, I hope. Um, and honestly, waiting has been the hardest part. I have agreed to continue to work for the buyer for a full year as a Spanish interpreter and as a consultant to ensure a smooth transition and to help both the clients and the subcontractors feel comfortable with the change. Now, for some reason, this falls through. I know that Mike will help me pursue other options. So remember, no matter the size of your language business, taking a moment to find its value could pay off. Thank you.
Thanks, Jackie. That's great. Guys, if you have questions, just shoot them in the chat. And again, we'll have time later. Melissa, I'd love to have you speak next and just introduce yourself and give a little background on
Sure.
who you are.
My name is Melissa Wurst. I'm here in St. Louis, Missouri. I am 63 years old, just turned that a few days ago. And I have a translation company. We are 95% written translation, 5% oral interpreting. We specialize in mostly healthcare, patient communications, also benefit communications for employees that involve healthcare. We also have a other variety of language services, from linguistic screening, and we're in health literacy and English as well. So we're very varied in that. I contacted Mike in August. I have had a lot, I've been in this business for 28 years, and I've had lots of buyers contact me over the years from various places, industries. They didn't really want to look at you once they realized the revenue's under a million. So when I talked to Mike in August, I asked him, is it possible? Here's where we are. Is it possible that there's a sale? And he said, yeah, I think so, And that was August. Same thing as Jackie. 2 weeks later, I had introductions to four possible buyers. Um, there were two of those buyers that I felt fit what I was looking for my company. My criteria was number one, I'm a two-person company. I wanted to maintain my project manager's position and offer her an opportunity with the new company. I wanted revenue streams from my regular teams to continue. That's a lot. They depend on it. We have a regular Spanish team that does all of our Spanish translations, and I wanted that to continue. I wanted consistency for our clients. Money was not my top priority. It's nice, and I'm very happy with the way things came out, but I ended up going with a buyer. We closed in October of this year, so 2 months. It's very fast. Be ready for it. The buyer I chose, I feel that I really align values-wise. He's keeping the company as it is, everything the same. Has a holding company. He's been in this industry for 30 plus years. He bought two Brazilian translation companies at the beginning of last year, and this is his growth strategy to open up another vertical and to buy small businesses. And it's a little bit more than revenue. It's all your processes and systems as well. It's not without its stress. And I had been doing, my tip would be make sure your financials are there and they're not just contained in your QuickBooks or your system. We've been running major financial reports in Excel for about 18 years. So I had 18 years of I could show profitability, where we are. I mean, the first thing I would say is to get together your budget and income, and put it in there and know your cost of goods, know what your expenses are, and then be able to show that through the years. So with that, so we closed in October of this year. I stay on for 3 months, which at the end of this month is my official retirement. However, I'm still here doing some things. Accounting is the last system to move over, and we were on an accounting system that's quite different from what other people use. We use Peachtree accounting, which is very much like an accountant's thing rather than QuickBooks. So he is right now synchronizing processes between the two Brazilian companies and our companies. We are also ISO certified, so we brought those processes to the table. The project manager was offered an opportunity, and so far it's been very good. It was an asset purchase for him, which is better for taxes. I got a payout up front, and then I have a structured buyout based on earnings and profitability over the next 2 years. Thank you.
Great, Melissa. Thank you. So you're happy so far?
Yes.
Okay. So Darlene, you're up, and you've got plenty of time.
Hey, y'all. I'm Darlene Geyer. I'm a nationally certified sign language interpreter. I had a language access company. We did sign language captioning, spoken languages in Los Angeles County, California. I'm currently in Tennessee. I sold and moved. Um, I opened the business in 1992, when the Americans with Disabilities Act was just getting started. I've always relied on legal underpinnings to drive demand. And so that was, kind of my strategy there. I was in business for 30 years. I've been an interpreter for 40. So I, had a really good command of the marketplace. I really knew what was going on. And was able to leverage a lot of that. The name of the business was Accommodating Ideas. At its height, we were doing it about 3.7 million a year. Of course, I wish I had sold then and didn't. I did the cardinal sin of, waiting too long. And so anyway, it worked out anyway. Um, I became aware of Mike. Um, I don't remember if it was an email, but I was working with a financial advisor, and he had a team, and that was great. But they didn't know the language services industry, and so that bothered me. But Mike at Language Transactions, he understood it intimately. When I pulled the trigger and decided to sell, my husband had a pest control company, so I had already done a sale of a business with him. So that was really good. And I had been preparing. I was preparing my business for years, literally, to sell it, to make sure that it could run on its own, that, it didn't need me, and that the systems were in place. So all of that was happening. Um, Mike held my hand when I needed hand holding, brought 5 buyers. Um, he was just the right amount of professional and the right amount of letting me do what I felt I needed to do. So I didn't feel like I was steered in any other way than what I wanted and needed to do. Um, so I went with Mike. I closed in June of 2022. That was post COVID. And the value of the business, I was in California, and California completely shut down. I lost 2/3 of a business I spent 30 years
Oh my
building.
goodness.
So that I was gutted, believe me. But I'm a scrappy chick, so I hung in there. And so when I sold the business, it was just roughly over 1 million in sales. But like Melissa, I had a track record, and I had customers I had had for 20 years. So I knew what I had, and having an anchor in a marketplace like Los Angeles is valuable, and I knew it. So, I talked to the folks that, Michael brought forward, all great. And I went with a deaf run company because we were predominantly sign language. I felt like it was just the right thing to do, and it was the best deal. It was the best deal that was offered to me. So it wound up being an asset sale. It wound up, we both had to take some risk post COVID. I knew what I had, but is it going to come back? Nobody knew. So I had to take some risks. So I did the earnout. They had to take some risk. And they did in just doing the asset sale, and not knowing if those customers were going to continue to perform. Um, Glad to say they did, and glad to say that they we did a structure that was a down payment, and then they did this structure where I was to get an earnout based on sales, which I was really okay with because I knew the business would perform. I had been doing business for 30 years. I knew what it would do, but that remained to be seen. But in the throes of all this, after we had closed, this company was also acquiring other companies as a growth strategy, my company being one of them. They, I think, were a little too optimistic about their cash capability there, and it came back and had to renegotiate the initial agreement. So we had to amend it. And that was very uncomfortable for me. But I trusted the guys that I sold to. I didn't like one of the guys that was representing them, we clashed. Our personalities did not mesh. I didn't like this person. This person didn't like me. So I just tried to get over myself and make the best of that situation. And I think what got me through it, and I so hear you, Melissa, is knowing my financials, knowing my business, knowing where every dime in that earnout was going to come from, and being able to verify and check it. And that proved to be really valuable because the person that they brought in to help them with all the growth, these guys were growing and now they had all, the Los Angeles stuff. And so it was becoming, tough to manage. You have my sympathy, really. But okay, then the calculations that I was getting for the first couple rounds of the earnout were whacked, and I knew they were whacked. So if I didn't have a good command of exactly what the agreement was, where every single dime of the earnout that was being calculated, where all that was coming from, I really could have been in trouble. So because I'm a tenacious terrier when it comes to money. I think most of us are. Why are we in business? So one thing led to another, and we had to kind of renegotiate the initial agreement, do an amendment. Then I had to show these guys, and I'm telling you, this was a CPA, and I had to take his hand and go, no, that is not the calculation. This is the calculation. And I had to do it 3 times. So that made me, it was very intimidating. But that made me feel like, okay, am I being treated badly here? And, again, I'm a scrappy chick. You don't want to treat me badly. So anyway, I went ahead and we redid it. We did an amendment. I had to pay my attorney a little bit more money. I didn't like that, but I got a better deal in the end. They paid me more money and they paid me interest and they paid me and they paid me. so so it did wind up being okay. The feeling of trust of the initial buyers um, stayed solid and remains solid to this day. They were doing what they needed to do. I understand that they had a tiger by the tail, if you will, and they were trying to manage it, and that it included me, but they needed to amend that agreement. I being retired, I'm 68. I just didn't want the agreement to stretch out for too long. And that was, a point of contention. But we did get it ironed out. The payments have been like clockwork. The company is doing fantastic. The sales are wow. So I'm very happy ultimately with what happened there. So um, let me see here. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to closing out the agreement. It went from a 3-year to a 5-year agreement. We're halfway through. I'm looking at, coming to a conclusion in a couple of years here, 2027. I'm kind of right in the middle. So I feel really good about that. Um, I think the most positive thing about doing the sale was the preparation, making sure that the business could just run without me and that the customers, and they obviously were solid and would transfer. And I would say we probably had 90%, 95% transfer over. And then the buyer was able to go good fit, bad fit, and trim from there. And that's just the natural process. In the asset sale, I mean, I had at the end of COVID, at one point I had 15 employees. At the end of COVID, I had about 8. And I was going down swinging, making sure everybody was getting paid, however we could do it, unemployment, however we needed to do that. So So all of them, because of everything that was happening with COVID, they all began to look for better jobs anyway, because I could not offer them possibly what they could get in other places. So everything kind of just worked out, I think, for my employees the way that it should have. I'm still in touch with a few of my higher level employees. We became friends. We, duked it out during COVID. And, uh, so that's been really great. But they didn't take any employees. They didn't take care of anyone. They didn't want,
Oh,
still working on today. And, so away we go. Um, I'm I'm very happy ultimately with how everything went. And, thanks to Mike and his team for, setting me up literally in my retirement.
great. Thanks, Darlene. Guys, that was great, great presentations. As Isabella mentioned, please put, if you have questions in the chat or raise your hand. This is a time to ask folks. I'll put my email in chat also. If you guys want to reach out to anyone, I think just check out where their company is. But I just had some general questions for you guys. Again, the three of them, it's $1 million or under in terms of revenue. And if each of you can say, not the number, but say what percentage was cash, what percentage was seller note, how long do they ask you to stay on? If you could just answer that, just so people get an idea of what buyers are doing. And just big picture, sellers like more cash up front and buyers like less cash up front. And because of the economy and what's going on, less cash up front is king. So if you guys could just say, Melissa, Jackie, and Darlene, we agreed to 20% cash up front, an earn out over 5 years. Just let people know, or a seller's note or whatever. That would be helpful. Melissa, you have those statistics.
I don't have the exact percentages available. We went with less cash up front. And then the earnings buyout over the next 2 years is capped at a certain amount.
Okay, so was an earnout agreement an earnout as opposed to a fixed amount that they were going to pay?
It is. It's an earnout agreement based on revenue generated each month. And then we also, the buyer added a caveat later, not only revenue, but profitability has to remain at a certain point. So part of our stressor during the sale is 1 month before we're ready to close, I lost a client. It was an interpreting a client, but they were using our OPI as a call center, and it represented quite a bit of revenue. It was smaller on the profitability mark, but than our written translation, but it was still a major loss. It caused a great amount of stress. And I went back to the buyer, and I told them about it. But, I also looked at what else we were bringing on. And we had quotes out there and we were bringing on new clients. And I said, this is more than just revenue. This is systems and processes. We've been writing about localization maturity and had designed a process management model for the localization industry 15 years ago, before Common Sense Advisory, jumped on localization maturity. So we had some proprietary things like that. But that's it. I did want to also share that I did ask my buyer what tip that he would give. And he said something I hadn't even thought about. He said, if you're going to go down this road and through this process, be ready to do it, because you can be emotionally tied to it. But he said he's dealt with people before that they back out of it at the end. They decide they don't want to do it, and you've kind of wasted time at that point. So be sure you are ready to do it.
Great, thanks. That's really helpful, Melissa. So what she mentioned and what Darlene mentioned is it's not always clean. You have to negotiate. In the 11th hour, things happen. Melissa loses a big account. A CPA comes in and tries to bully the seller. Those things happen. Hopefully if you have a broker, they're helping with that. But it's not a clean, simple situation. So that's one thing. The other one to notice is it's very interesting. For a buyer, they prefer an earnout. And what is an earnout? An earnout says say you're doing 1 million this year. If you do 1 million next year, we'll pay you X. If you do 1,200,000, we'll pay you Y. If you do 800,000, we'll pay you less. That mitigates the risk for the buyer, but it could increase the risk for the seller because the seller's not doing the processes anymore. They're usually out the door. So you have to trust the buyer for that. So an earnout is tricky. And you want to have trust in the buyer and know what they're going to do and how they're planning to grow it, etc. The other piece is most earnouts are done on revenue. However, smart buyers are going to say, yeah, maybe you increase the revenue, but my profits jump down. Again, the challenge is the seller's not responsible for the gross margin net profit anymore. So you have to know what the buyer's plans are. Yeah. Jackie, you want to talk about just big picture, how that was structured?
Yes, it's not final, but there's an initial payment, hopefully in the next month or so, and then a second payment after a year. I retain ownership of the business only 10%. And obviously, this is so that there's a collective interest because I want to make sure that the clients and the subcontractors are taken care of. And of course, they want to make sure that I continue to contribute as needed.
And you're staying on for a year?
Yes.
Okay. So great. So another option, everyone keep in mind, is you can say, hey, some buyers will do, I'm not going to give an earnout, but you're going to maintain 10% or 15% or 20%, whatever it is, of the ownership. And why is that interesting? It's what people call the second bite of the apple. If the business grows and you have now 10%, that 10% is worth more after year one. So you have interesting bite of the apple. Sounds very biblical. Yeah, so that's an interesting option that you can think of as another possibility. Darlene, you want to give us kind of parameters of what you agreed to?
Sure. It was basically 10% cash up front. And then I did an earnout. And ultimately, the earnout wound up, of course, being based on sales. But because we were coming out of COVID, um, I worked in all of the counties pretty much south of San Luis Obispo to the Mexican border. So I included a lot of those counties. So any new sales, because I knew that these accounts were going to perform. And the issue was having an anchor in Southern California in that economy. So that's how I structured it. Any new accounts, and then of course uh, any revenues from my client list. So we used that client list and then translated it. Um, and that was for the 3-year earnout period paid out over 5 years. So that structure wound up maxing out for all 3 years. Hallelujah. So I did earn on the earnout the max, but we stretched it out so that it was tenable by the buyer.
Great. You said 3 years and then you mentioned 5 years. So is it now a 5-year earnout or?
Yeah, it's technically a 3-year earnout payable in 5 years. So they did this tiered system based on the sales. I mean, so that they could defer some of their payment. I have to say that I think I'm paying less taxes because I've stretched it out and I'm not getting, huge sums of money. So that is one advantage. But of course, you're taking a risk. Are they going to be around in 5 years? But I think that's, it was a risk for me worth taking because these guys, when they came in, they were doing four. They acquired, 4 million a year. They acquired my company. I know what my company did. And so then they were at 7. So these guys were blowing up. And they did a better job than I would have, quite frankly. So that's something to really think about, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're paying me throughout the course of 5 years. And okay, I have to wait, but it's workable for them. And I need them, to be profitable to pay me.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, you bring up some good points. One is, by the way, 10% cash up front, 3 year earn out with a 5 year payout. It's pretty favorable to the buyer. Why? Because it mitigates the risk to a large extent. But you take that, as Jackie said, because Darlene said, because you know the buyer, you know what they're capable of. They're growing it better than you would because they have more sales on the ground, more resources. So part of this again is a negotiation and a calculated risk assessment. But one piece of good news, and we've done over 40 deals. I've never, there may have been one deal. I didn't work with that guy, and he didn't even pay the final payment. I've never had a deal where the buyer has gone down and lost money. So why is that? It's because this industry is so specialized, and the buyers, strategic buyers, are so careful that they're not going to do a deal if it's not going to be to their advantage. And they're doing it strategically. Darlene had an ASL business. This was an ASL company. Jackie does this bilingual communication. She has these clients that could go in other directions. Melissa had an ISO certification. So the buyer is very smart, and they're not going to invest poorly. But another thing that Darlene mentions is taxes. So when you're selling the business, each state has a different tax rules and regulations. So some states that say, okay, you're selling the business for 1 million, you're taxed on 1 million, even though you don't get it all. In other places, they say, okay, you're taxed on the money you received that year. So you want to talk to your accountant, your tax accountant, before you get started. I don't see questions yet. I don't see raised hands. Another question for all three of you, if you could, and we'll go in reverse order. If you have one thing to say, here's what I learned. If you're going down this path, be aware of this, or know this, or don't do this. What would that communication be? Because again, there's so much uncertainty here. Darlene, what would you say that would be for you now, post looking back at it?
I think I would have delved more into the due diligence on the finances of the buyer. They dove into my finances with a fine-tooth comb, and I wasn't as diligent. I don't know. I just wasn't that. I kind of felt like I almost didn't have a right to do it because they were buying the company. And you want to maintain good relationships, but I learned very quickly that I needed to know more about their financial health.
Right. Good. Excellent point. Jackie?
I'm more of an emotional person. I needed to make sure this is the right time because, like I mentioned before, I never thought about retiring. I always thought I'll work till my mind is with me. Um, but making sure that you have a plan and that you know what you're going to do after you sell the business. That's it.
Great. Great. Yeah. Melissa?
I think the one thing is, I wish that I had researched different buyout models, right? I basically kind of went with the one that the buyer offered me. And that's because also money was not my main priority, right? But I wish I'd been aware of different buyout models that are out there. One thing that I did that was in my corner, when he gave me his LOI, his letter of interest, my best friend was in mergers and acquisitions for 30 years, and he headed a mergers and acquisitions department for pharmaceutical. So I used him. I did not hire a lawyer, and he had written these contracts, and he just said, let me go over this. I'll tell you if there's any red flags, because once you get the lawyers involved, they're going to go back and forth, editing things out. So he was very happy with it. My buyer's already been here in St. Louis with his implementation team. which has further built our trust. And so that's where we are. But I would again reiterate, have a plan, get your financial statements, hire someone to make them. If you don't know how to do it, get your data. I mean, data is fact, right? If you have that to go back on, and then tout your processes and your systems.
Great, great. So these are all important points, guys. I'll start with Jackie talking about feeling. As much as we talk about numbers and process and EBITDA, ROI, all that, if you don't feel comfortable with the person buying you, don't do it. This isn't a date. This is a marriage. You're buying someone, and not only that, it's like it's not just it's not even selling your house. You're inviting a roommate to come into your business. So you have to have a level of trust and comfort. If you don't, it's going to backfire. Darlene mentions the due diligence from the buyer. Absolutely. I'm feeling a little bit like I didn't help you guys enough, because what I do with every buyer is say, where are you getting the money? How are you doing? How are you paying for it? Is this a cash purchase? Are you getting an SBA loan? So I should be communicating that to you guys, by the way. But so I work with the buyer and the seller. And the buyer say, oh, it's no problem. I got money. It's a problem. You have to know how they have the money. Where is it coming from? Because an SBA loan, there's all kinds of complications. An SBA loan, they don't pay if it's a seller's note to the seller, and it's through an SBA loan. You have to pay the SBA back before you pay the seller. That's inconvenience for some. So again, knowing what the valuation, how is the buyer going to pay? The other piece is retirement, and knowing what you're going to do. As Jackie mentioned, you have to be ready for this. My favorite story I tell all the time is this guy was 77, and I thought, wow, he's ready to retire. Yeah, we found a great buyer, great price, exactly what he wanted. It was legal buyer, $3 million company. And we get to the 11th hour, he says, I can't do it. I said, you can't do it. Why? He says, because my wife found out, and she said, if I'm home all the time, she'll kill me. I thought, oh Lord, you've got to decide what your plan is to retirement. You have to know where you're going, what you're going to do. And it's a big, so if you haven't decided what you're going to do or how you're going to do it, you don't want to put your business on the market.